Hey guys! Officer Rock. Not Officer Rock. Can you tell? Can you spot the difference? Today we wake up with, dun dun dun, you guessed it, more ACIC figures in on. So yesterday we had the story. It was that the consumption of narcotics in Australia is that large. The figures have to be wheeled out over a few days. Okay, so look, we've got estimated 10 ton of methamphetamine, which is decreased by like 0.7 of a gram. So, we're still, we've kind of got that market cap of meth use, right? Yeah, about 10 ton. The great minds, the experts that we believe in other areas, now they're not so experty and they might have got it wrong, But anyway, so we got 10 tons of meth yesterday. Today we've got 3 ton of cocaine. Now, the other thing you got to remember in all this, because one of the down players on X, one of the government trolls, or who knows, we won't speculate on that, pointed out to me, oh yeah, those figures could be exaggerated. 100%, they are exaggerated. They price it at ridiculously high prices. It makes it no better though. Half that figure still doesn't make it any better. What, go from 10 ton to 5.5 ton? Go from 20 tons of drug use down to 10 ton? Still no better. So anyhow, when they pointed that out to me, I go, yeah, but hang on a minute. The purity, so when they test it, it's actually the other way. Because how so? I'll tell you how so. When they test the water purification, they test pure heroin. When heroin is sold at a street level, it is jumped on about 6 to 1, maybe 10 to 1. If you were to sell pure heroin down there in Richmond, literally people would be dying. The drug dealers would have bad press, and they wouldn't want that. Aside the money factor, with heroin, it's no secret that heroin gets jumped on, cut, literally to save lives, because pure heroin is just too strong. You just could not sell pure heroin and people end up dying. Anyway, all those little side possible stories aside, the reality is the street level drugs are jumped on. So you could take those figures that the ACIC just wheeled out yesterday through testing in the sewage, testing the water, and you could probably times it by 6. Fact, literally. So say they came up with 10 ton, then divide it by 2 for the exaggerated price figures, or divide it by 4 for the exaggerated price figures, then multiply it by 8 for the cutting value, and that's your true drug use in Australia. Now you tell me what we're doing is working. Before, you were never ever it just boggles my brain. It is the most no-brainer. It is just a no-brainer. We have to change the way we're doing things. We have zero morale in our police. It's just like a full double-edged sword. So for example, some 70% of property crime, thefts, are done by people trying to fund drug addiction. It's a huge percentage. If they're not trying to fund it, they're doing it because they're on the meth and they're up 24 hours a day and it's what they're good at, who knows. But something ridiculously high, like 70% of property-based crimes are from drug addicts feeding their habit. That's the reality. Then, so if you were to change things and do it differently, you would lose that motivation alone. So you would lose the motivation for your house to be robbed. There's that aspect. Then there's the health. I was thinking about this in the shower today. I know. Yeah, okay, wash that thought out of your brain. I was thinking about this morning. Literally, what we're doing now with Prohibition is like this. Is like, right, we've got this problem. People in HQ Holdens are not, they're driving around in the 70s with their tinny, living the Aussie life down there in the beach with their Sandman, but these buggers aren't wearing seatbelts. And whenever they hit a tree or a lamppost, they're dying. We're losing beautiful Aussie people because they're too happy-go-lucky and they won't wear seatbelts. How are we going to do this? Okay, we're going to have to get a little bit of a change the culture, change the thinking. So when people hop into a car, they just whack a seatbelt on without even thinking about how are we going to do this. Okay, first we'll get in bed and with the car manufacturers, and we'll change, we'll make sure that seatbelts are available and they're comfortable. Okay, check, got that. You got to remember the automotive industry literally fought for about 10 years once upon a time to resist that type of change. Literally. So let's check that box. Okay, we've got seatbelts in the car. Now what are we going to do? Now we're going to run an advertising campaign mixed with a policing campaign. So we're going to have police on the side of the road specifically, and motorcycle cops specifically trained to look for people not wearing a seatbelt. And we're going to try and start, using laws to eradicate, to remind them, hurt them in the hip pocket that it's a law. It's an actual law. You have to wear a seatbelt. Okay, yeah, no problem. That's great. What else are we going to do? We're going to run an advertising campaign. So when you get your Rego sheet, you're going to see, hey, don't forget to buckle up. We're going to see here on the radio with the wonderful 3AW, hey, buckle up. Or, whatever the advertising campaign was for, buckle up. And we're going to see it on billboards, and we're going to change the thinking that way. So people are slowly over 5-10 years, their entire thinking is going to go from one arm out the window, a Winnie Red in the other hand, a tinny between their legs, because there was no mobile phones to have between your legs back then. A Winnie Red in one hand, arm out the window, no seatbelt on, is going to change to a Winnie Red in one hand, arm inside the window, seatbelt on in about 5 to 10 years' time. Brilliant. Now with drugs, with narcotics, you know what stage we're at? I'll tell you what stage we are honestly at. We are at the stage where the cars don't even come with seatbelts. So you can have let's educate and try and police it to remind people that it's illegal, but you haven't even got the seatbelts. You got nothing. You just got the entire industry is still being sold by people you don't control. It's not in a good. You don't control it. It's in the bad guys. So you've got the people who aren't regulated, people who aren't just complete underground. It's madness. The first rule, the first trick of changing people's thinking, culture, doing things differently is to own the market. Now, I understand. Initially, you think, oh, go away, what? You just want drugs. We're at market cap anyway. So don't worry about that. We've already got 20 tons, probably closer to 40 tons of drugs being consumed every single year by Australians. Now, we've been running with since at least the 80s, at least, longer than that, but we'll run with at least the 80s, about prohibition and, we can't be seen to be condoning drug use, all these nonsense that was initial. I tell you, here, I've just thought of a little side one. You can't be seen to condone drug use. Why? Because of its addictive nature, right? Because of its addictive nature. That's the reality. You cannot be seen to be selling something that is so addictive. That's the reality, right? Okay, no, it's a bit of an ethical area. It's like selling tobacco with nicotine, which is far more addictive, but still, it's same thing. It brings ethics into play. Like, hang on, But then you have things like pokies. Pokies have algorithms that literally drive the same dopamine buzzers that any drug does. So, and hang on, gambling, technically, if we're going to look at it from a perspective of monetary, take your life, gambling is worse. Because, how so? Because gambling, there's no cap. You can like literally have the deed for your house, go in, cash that in, get $1 million for it, whatever it may be, and you can throw that away in bang, one go. Go and try and use $1 million worth of heroin. It's just not possible. Go and try and use $1 million worth of cocaine in one go. It's just not possible. Which makes gambling addiction significantly worse. The worst. Arguably the worst addiction of all the addictions. So, my point is this. It's very simple. We have to do something different, you let. People are dying, you let. We're at 600 a year in Victoria alone dying. That's a lot. For a country like Australia to have an avoidable situation, or at least a situation that could be handled significantly different. Brought up out of the gutter. So, you know, here's another one. Somebody said to me again on social media, oh yeah, I just came through San Francisco and all these people were zombied. You know why they're zombied? You know those images coming out of San Francisco and the opiate epidemic in America? You know why they're like that? A, because that trade is controlled by the cartels. So there's that. And you think, how so? Well, what would be different? I'll tell you what would be different. All those people you see in zombie land, what they want is heroin. Remove your remove your bias, just they want heroin. Pure heroin does not have that effect on people. Pure heroin would just, they would be completely different people. What they are forced with, because of the current situation, is to buy off scumbags, and these scumbags have been cutting the synthetic, the heroin, that these poor people just wanted heroin. They've been cutting it with horse tranquilizer and synthetics like fentanyl, which turns them into a cyst-infected zombie that you see there. This is my point. Why would you want to do that to people? That is what keeping it underground does. It creates this like situation where the people that are sick, who need the help, they're the ones copping it, and the scumbags are the ones who are doing stuff like that. Now, you can't even blame the scumbags. This is how bad a situation it is. You can't even blame the scumbags because you created it. The government created the situation. You put these people in a bad position, generational drug addicts or generational disenfranchised. You put them in this position. Then you create this black market where, hey, you know, you can like live like a normal person if you just sit there and sell gear. So, oh yeah, really? Okay, so what do I have to do? All you got to do is stay off drugs, and here, this guy will buy it from this guy for $50 and sell it to this guy for $100. Really? Yeah. And it sells itself. You don't even have to try and put on any marketing, or it sells itself. Literally, people will be coming up. Takes about 1, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and before you know it, you get a little clientele. But that leads to, obviously, because it's not regulated, unscrupulous people who do what? Who will get girls out walking the streets to be able to afford to pay for the drugs that they're selling. Who will cut it with nonsense, because why? Because there's a competition. So, you know, instead of just buying rubbish that they can't feel, they'll go over here and they'll buy this one that just sends them into a stupor. You've got to protect them from themselves. They're addicts, they're sick. But you're not. Why would you want to do that? I'll tell you why. because you get advice from either nonsense people, I'm sorry to say. You get advice like from a cult-like freak of heavily snout in the trough rehab, which was just literally, they were responsible. They were this rehab that feeds the government all this nonsense information, was literally behind toddlers being used as currency. They're a nonsense. It's madness. So you have these people who literally are like a cult. In fact, I think they might be heavily religious, something like that. But these are the type of people that are still working on archaic dinosaur-like ideologies and philosophies, giving the government information. Then, hang on, it's worse. Then you've got another person you go to for advice on this matter. Who are you going to go to? Oh, let's get some advice from the police. Yeah, they'll tell us. Well, the police they have a culture of locking these people up. They think they are scumbags. Every single joke, they don't look at it like, oh, this guy's sick, he should. They look at it like, you're a filthy scumbag junkie. That's literally the culture that exists in Victoria Police. Literally. Literally. How do you think people what do you think was leading up to, let's take this all the way. What do you think was leading up to when Veronica Nelson, that beautiful Indigenous lady who used the buzzer 50 odd times at Dame Phyllis, the women's prison, what do you think was being said in between the two prison officers, the lovely women who just left her buzz up 50 times before she died? What do you think was being said? I can assure you it wasn't, hey, look at this, this poor drug addict, we better get her some, a synthetic opiate so she doesn't die on us. Oh, look at this, lovely poor sick person, this poor Indigenous lady. Gosh, it's horrible how she was so upset in her life that she ended up, wanting to mask it through drug use. There was none of that, mate. There was more, oh, look at this pain in the ass. Veronica, if you buzz up one more time, I'm gonna put a spit mask on you. Like an ugliness. You can't blame those people though, because they do. They deal with bad situations, which is my point. Why the hell would you go to them for that type of advice? It's a nonsense. They're going to be heavily biased. They've been thrown up on. They've been feces thrown at them when these drug addicts are hanging out in their worst. They've seen the ugliest, and you want to go to them for, hey, what do you think we should do to deal with this? What do you think they're going to say? They're going to say they're animals, they're scumbags. I hate them. Oh, keep them away from me. I had this one, literally flick a booger on me. Can you believe it? This one flicked a booger on me. I couldn't believe it. They don't see the other side of the coin. They don't see them when it's a madness. And we go to it's just such a nonsense, the whole industry. But then, wait, now throw in this. Then we'll have those who sell the drugs, who drive it all, who pimp out the women. They're going to be, aside sending the vast majority of the profits offshore to arrange another import, aside the vast majority of the money ends up offshore. So you're removing, just like that shoplifting ring, you're removing the money from the Australian economy. But hey, don't say that. You might be misconstrued as racist. Gosh. And that, anyway, I won't veer off onto that. My point is, it's a madness. Okay? We have to. I don't know how. Well, I got some pretty good ideas, but it has to change. This business where you think it just has to change. It's a no-brainer. Why it has to change is because it was a different world. When Nixon, Ian Slinger, these type of people wheeled out their heavily ulterior motive orientated plan to deal with drugs, it was a different world. We had religion on it. Don't even worry about that part, girlfriend. Just stick with Anslinger, because there was a myriad of Anslingers around. Anslinger was just the most famous one. Anslinger knew, and I've said this on other podcast versions of these little half podcasts, Anslinger was well aware that he called them darkies. So he was well aware that African Americans disproportionately were higher drug users, which isn't race-based, it's socio-economic based, okay? Which unfortunately, during that time, the African Americans also were higher in that socio-economic, the lower socio-economic group. So it has nothing to do with, drug use has nothing to do with race, obviously, but it does have a lot to do with your socio-economic circumstance. If you're struggling in life financially, if you haven't got a lot going on in your life, you haven't got a lot to lose or whatnot, you got a much higher chance of turning to drugs. It's just the way it is. It's just, it makes sense, right? You've got less to live for. So of course you've got a lot less not to live for. You've got a lot less to lose. So of course, who cares if you've got $1 million in the bank and you were to turn to drug use and risk that million? There's a lot to risk. Whereas if you got $1 in the bank and you're going to risk that dollar if you turn to this thing that makes you feel really good, there's a higher chance. Makes sense, right? Anyway, so the likes of Anslinger recognised this, and as a way to get at the African Americans, in his racist mind, he pushed Prohibition. It was a way to in his very racist mind, it was a way to keep a thumb further on the heads of people he didn't like, but also by turning it into something illegal, it was his way of getting that segment of community off the streets, locked up. So he was like the governor at Darringol, who would walk past the inmates' medication line and you could see his whole demeanour would change. He would you could see, he would be like, yuck, I'm working in a prison, I've got to see this riffraff. Gee, literally, same principle. That's the kind of character we were dealing with, the same type of scumbag. That alone is reason we need to change. We need to change heavily and quickly. Because why? Because Australia is not like that. Australia prides itself on being inclusive, tolerant, progressive. In fact, all our politicians that are doing a lot of damage have been voted in on that one fact. We're fairly we like to include, tolerate, all that stuff. Well, you can't exactly be. Who are you including here? A drug dealer? Who are you tolerating on this one? Hey? A drug dealer while keeping your finger on the people that need the help. It's madness. Madness. Anyway, see you soon. I'll be back. What have I got to talk about next? Oh, it'll be a beauty. Yeah, I think I'm gonna just well, you have to wait and see. Mickey Caleb tuning out.